Welcome back to Archicad in Minutes. In our previous lessons, we have modeled the walls, placed the doors, and added the windows to our 3-bedroom bungalow. Today, we'll complete the basic structural framework by adding integrated slab, columns, and beams into one coordinated model. Let's begin. So, coming down to our column, in our previous video, we discussed intensively on column settings. So, we are changing this to a square column, 230 by 230. It's a reinforced concrete. Then the column height is from ground floor to roof level, and we are okay. So we are going to place our column at a strategic location since we are just dealing with a simple bungalow. So I can place it here and manually drag it. Control plus Shift plus D. You need to know where you are placing so that you know where you are picking from. Making a copy again. I want to start with the external. So you need to know where you are picking. So these are the external. So I'm going to have small break. If you look at it, I'm picking from different points. So I'm going to have one at this point and one at this point. I'm going to have it here and here. So in this case, I'm going to hold on my shift key so that I will align it with this. Then I'm going to duplicate another one. So in this case, I'm going to hold my shift key so that I will align it to this. Then I'm taking one to this extreme end. Then I'm going to have one at this edge. So it's a simple bungalow. So I believe this number of columns will be sufficient to provide the required stability. If you are dealing with a story buildings, you need to have structural drawings so that you integrate the columns appropriately. So we may have one here at this point. So I think we are good to go. So this is how for the columns. Then for our slab, we are going to use composite slab so that we will have the tile, the hardcore, and then the oversight concrete. So we need to come down to this. And in our previous class, we discussed intensively on slabs. So we click on this. We can use magic wand. That's you click on your spacebar and hold. So it will give you exact point that you want. So in this case, we want our slab to be to the core only, not to the external. So we can do it manually by clicking on this. If you are dealing with a complete rectangle, that's when you will use this. Or you are dealing with a slanted rectangle, you will use this. But in this case, our shape is not a complete rectangle or square. So I'm going to click on this to this point. My slabs doesn't extend to my plaster to this point, to this point, and then back to this point. So if you go to our 3D, so I did not modify it. I did not place my slabs accordingly. So clicking it here, so you see where my reference plane location is. So I have to click on this, and then everything fall in place. So if you look at our doors, they are flushing now with the tiles. And then our door is at 100. So everything is falling in place if you look at it. And then our 3D, we are seeing our soil, our oversized concrete, and our reinforced concrete. So let's bring down our section line that we drew earlier. Let's have it cut, so we can adjust this by reducing it to this point, and then we jump down to our section. This is previous. So if you see it now, everything is falling in place. Our doors and our windows are already placed here. So the next one is we want to have a suspended slab at this point to achieve an aesthetic building, design here. So we need a composite slab beam. So we are trying to check if we can get one similar to what we want. Let's come down to option, come down to element attributes and profile manager. So we are going to create a simple beam, a simple composite beam. So we are going to make a duplicate. We'll say 230, let's call it 200 mm by 230 mm beam with groove, or let's say with grout. So we click OK, and then it brings us to this. So if you want, we can delete all of this so that we'll not have much of headache, and then we create our own model. So the core is going to be 230 by 230. So we are dropping this by 70 to make it 300. So, and then this is going to be the core. And then we come down here and put a reinforced concrete structural, and then we click on this, and then we have our 30mm plaster, and then we have 30mm plaster downside, and then we have 30mm plaster by the side. So we are extending this to this point. Then we are going to use line tool, and then we'll click 15 cm by 25 cm by 15. So this is the grouting that we want to achieve. So take it to this point, to this, and then we are shifting it by 25 mm. So we are going to cut this, and then we'll make use of minus. We use magic wand and we remove. So we have our beam. So we click save. So we are moving this to this center point so that it will identify it as this is center point. We click save, we click OK. So we go down to our ground floor and we click on beam, and then we check for this our beam here. We are drawing our beam from the center. So if you look at it, this is the point, this is our grouting. So if you want, we can come back and then we can modify it. We can leave it. We can leave it and then flip the beam, or you can start drawing your beam from this point so that you have it at the middle. So we click this and then we click our beam to this. So our beam starts completely from this column to this column, and then we'll check whether we draw it at the required level or not. So it means our beam is a bit high up, so we are going to bring down our beam to this level. And then if you look at the bottom, we have our grouting. If you want our grouting to be from the outside, we can mirror it. You come down to edit. We mirror. Let's drag it. And then we close this. And know that we need to change this to finish, since it is our plaster. And then we save. If you want to override, you can override it from here, or you override it on our model. So we bring our grooving now to the external parts of the beam. So we can change the color of the beam, come down to segment, and then we change it to titanium white, and then to titanium white, and then we have our beam with this color. If you look at our columns, they are inside the walls. So that's the beauty of using composite materials. So it will embed all the structural elements, and your model is going to be practically possible on site. Assuming we have just a solid wall 230, then we'll start having issue with the columns and then try to change the color of the columns. So now we have our drop down beam. If you want a bigger drop down, you can increase it to 450. You can increase it. That's to increase the depth. You bring this one down and increase the depth from 300 to 450 to 600, depending on the design that you are working on. So if we go back to our section, since we did not cut through the beam, so our section is okay. So let's create another view that cuts through the beam. Let's code this section 02. So you see how detailed the model is going to be at the end of the day. You already have your grooving, your grouting without necessary trouble or problem. So I believe you learn how to place columns well how to place your beam and how to place slab. And then in our next video, we are going to complete the roof. We'll have our perfect wall. Then we are going to use beam tool to create our roof cap, and then how to use the roof tool very well. So thank you, and see you in our next video.